All right. Good morning, everybody. I'm Captain John Wenzel, and I'm going to give the Bottle Rocketry presentation. It's going to be a PowerPoint video that I made up, and then afterwards, if you got questions, I can answer them. If you have any that come up during the questioning, or during the video rather, I'll be moderating as well, so I'll be reading your questions. A few administrative items. If you haven't been read this already, I'll read it to you. Please visit the Illinois Wing website for more information on today's presenters and presentations. Has bio information, has pictures of us, all that kind of stuff. And then reminder, all times in the schedule are the central time zone. So if you're coming from outside the central time zone, we're on CST here. That's the times we're using. And if you're attending the conference for CP credit, remember to complete the ENT survey at the end of the day today. And you'll see the link for it in the conference link on the website. Only one survey is needed for the entire day, not per session. So you just do it at the end of the day, not at the end of the session here. And then there'll be 4 lucky attendees selected to get a door prize of an Amazon gift card, but you have to register to be eligible to get one of those. And the Sunday winners will be selected and announced at the 3:50 afternoon hangar time, and the ones that won yesterday are already on the website. And then after the conference, you'll be receiving a feedback survey, so please take a few minutes and fill it out and let us know how we did, things we could do better in the future. So we'll get right going with the video. And as I said, I'll be monitoring the video and the question and answer. So if you have any questions, please pop them in. Remember to put your name in there, and then I will get them answered, and we'll get rolling. So we're going to hit it now and enjoy.
Hello, everyone. I'm Captain John Wenzel, and I'll be giving a presentation today on Bottle Rocketry. Before I get started on the presentation, I'll give you a little quick bio of myself. I was a cadet back in the 80s and went all the way through the cadet program and earned my spots award in 1985, and then got out of CAP until about 2002 when my son was old enough to join. And then I stayed in for 10 years after that, primarily doing cadet activity stuff, mainly at encampments, where I attended encampment every year for my tenure that time. I got out of CAP and then back in 2018, started up again with encampment and working primarily with cadet programs and aerospace education. So we get rolling here. First of all, there is a disclaimer I'd like to read to you, that in this presentation, the phrase pop bottle rocket has been abbreviated to PBR and is used frequently. Please do not confuse the use of PBR in this presentation with the commonly used abbreviation for the adult beverage, Pabst Blue Ribbon. Pabst Blue Ribbon will not be served during or after this presentation. If, after seeing PBR multiple times during this presentation, you're yearning for something to drink, get some coffee. All right, a humorous aside here, and we'll start you off with a little introductory fun video.
3, 2, 1.
All right, fine little video, slow motion pop bottle rocket being launched, and yes, no nuclear explosions so far. All right, another important factor we're going to talk about is safety, obviously, because it is an activity that possibly could get hurt if you're not looking forward to that. So we've got a safety demonstrator here. It's a new senior member that just joined recently, senior member Stash. We'll see him again later when we're doing some safety stuff I wanted to show you. He joined CAP about 2 weeks ago. Said he was a big fan of WH. We have no idea if WH is a person or a thing, and he hasn't told us yet, so we're just waiting to find out who or what WH is. So let's move on. Talk about pop bottle rocket, some of the benefits the program has. First of all, it's low cost long term. Really, the only expense you're going to have initially would be to buy the pop bottle launcher. And these vary in prices, and I'll get to these later. Some could be relatively cheap, on up to a little bit more expensive. But the only thing you're going to need other than the launcher is going to be a tire pump and soda pop bottles. And if you buy a durable launcher, it'll last many years. The one I have, I bought at the beginning of my tenure back in 2002, and I've had that ever since, have not had any problems with it. A very solid piece of machinery. Secondly, PBR, great recruiting tool. The rockets can be launched at a squadron meeting, in a field. If you're going to a organization, a school, to do a presentation, you can do that outside. It involves no fire or flame, just some water and some pressure, and you can adjust that to make it a fun experience. It attracts people because it's shooting stuff up in the air. It makes a popping sound when it goes off, and plus, if it's hot out, you get sprayed with delicious, cool water. It inspires innovation. As I said, many of the pop bottle rocket activities I do are at encampments. And typically what I'll do, I will have a goal for the cadets to achieve. This past year was getting an egg back to Earth unbroken. I don't tell them how to do it or a method to go about it. I just give them the materials, and then they have to figure it out. And we'll discuss a little bit later some of the neat things that the cadets do when they are building rockets. It's also a fun competitive event. If you have a squadron and you have cadets build rockets, you can have a contest to see who has the highest flying rocket, which rocket stays in the air the longest, or if you have some kind of a challenge for them, such as the egg challenge, who can return their cargo back to Earth safely. And one of the most important things is be tailored to fit your training program. The pop bottle rocket is part of the CAP and Bottle Rocketry badge and can be used as one of the achievements for that. But if you just wanted to do it as a separate event or something totally different, you can do that. So you can do a lot of the activities involved with pop bottle rocketry or just a few based on the needs of your squadron and the kind of cadets and senior members that they want to do. Okay, short little video here of some of the activities with pop bottle rocketry in the past few years. All right, as you can see, cadets planning, building, launching, and recovering the rockets. Fun activity for them because it's a hands-on activity and they get to use some of their initiative. They're not being told a certain way to do it. They just have to have a goal and they figure it out on their own. All right, as part of the CP Bottle Rocketry program, pop bottle rocketry can be used as one of the achievements. For the first phase, the redstone phase, cadets have to build 2 rockets with different power sources. A pop bottle rocket can be one of them. And if you look at that picture on the right, which is taken from the Bottle Rocketry manual, that rocket's very simple. Just has 3 fins on it, some duct tape. The requirement for the rocket is that the cadet builds their own pop bottle rocket. There are no requirements for how big the rocket has to be or any kind of complicated fins or anything else. They can make it simple as they want. Then a senior member just has to witness the cadet's pop bottle rocket launch. So each cadet must build their own rocket and then must launch the rocket. That's the only requirement. Now, you can also cater the training to meet your needs. The sheets you see on the left and right there are from my Operation Egg Drop, which is what we did at encampment. For this, what I did, I had a goal that they had to launch and recover an egg, a raw egg, without damaging it. Each team had the same amount of basic equipment, which consisted of the soda bottle for the rocket itself, some pieces of cardboard, a roll of duct tape. There were some extra items which they could purchase, and each team was given some play money, and they could come up to the station and purchase what they wanted. So they would have to figure out from this list what they wanted to buy, how much of it they wanted to buy, and how they wanted to design their rocket. This led to a lot of varied designs in the rocket, and the cadets had a lot of fun trying to figure out what the best rocket design would be for the purpose. As far as getting started in a pop bottle rocketry program, you're going to need some equipment. You're going to have to set up a launch site, and of course, safety, as always, is a primary concern. As far as equipment, you're of course going to need a pop bottle launcher, and you're going to need a tire pump or an air compressor to pressurize the rocket. And of course, the rocket itself is going to be a pop bottle. Now, launchers. There are several that are commercially produced. These are available from Amazon at the prices shown. You'll notice that the two on the upper left have gauges on them. That's why they're more expensive. It's a good idea, if you can, to try to get a launcher with a pressure gauge. If you don't get one with a pressure gauge, you'll need to get a tire pump that has a pressure gauge on it. Because many times when you're launching the rockets, some of the data you're going to record for your statistical areas is going to be the pressure of the water in the rocket. The kind of the upper left one for $70. There was an older version of this that I bought 15 years ago, and it still works fine now. It's a very heavy duty, made with heavy duty PVC pipe. If you're going to do a lot of pop bottle rocket activities, I would recommend buying one of these because it will stay good forever. Some of the smaller ones work well, but they're not as durable. And if they get messed around with, pushed around, dropped, stored improperly, they could possibly break. But you can see you can get them for a pretty low price. Now, on the other hand, if you decide, hey, I want to build one myself, I'm pretty good working with tools and stuff like that, NASA has an excellent set of plans on their website for building rockets. These plans are readily available, and later in the program, I'll show you the link to the NASA website, so you can look that up if you'd like to. As far as getting the rocket in the air, you're going to need a tire pump or an air compressor. And as I said before, if your launcher has no pressure gauge, make sure you get a pump that has one. Now, you're going to get water into the pump. The reason I say this is because when the water gets into the pump, before you pump it up, you'll get some water in there, and it could possibly rust the bottom of your pump out. So it's important that when you get done with your rocket launches for the day, if you're using a bicycle tire pump, you blow through the pump a few times just in the free air to get the water out. Air compressors are nice because the hose is always pressurized, so none of the water will get back into the hose for the air compressor. They also pump the rockets up a lot faster. The bigger the compressor, the quicker it will pressurize the rocket. A smaller compressor, like the one shown here, might take up to a minute to pressurize a rocket up to peak pressure. A bigger air compressor will have the rocket filled up to peak pressure in just a few seconds, but obviously the cost for that is going to be greater. Now, the pop bottles themselves. These are the things that you're going to be shooting into the air. A 2-liter bottle is the preferred size. The main reason for this is because there's enough volume in there that you can fit varying amounts of water, and it'll get it out to the biggest height. You can use smaller bottles down to about a 20-ounce size. The important thing to remember is that the cap of the bottle has to be the same size as a 2-liter soda bottle. You can't use a water bottle as a water pressure rocket if the nozzle on the top is not the same size. Short bottles may not fit over the launcher. The launchers have a tube in the middle of them that the rocket fits over. If the bottle does not go all the way down to the bottom of that tube, it can't be sealed against the launcher, and it won't be able to be used with it. Also, name brand companies, they use stronger bottles. Typically, I'll use either Coke or Pepsi bottles because the plastic on those is a little bit thicker and a little bit better quality. You can use no-name brands or off-brands, but just remember the plastic is not as strong and the bottles may not last as long for rockets. One important thing to remember, don't use old bottles. So if you have an old soda bottle, even a high-quality one, but you've left it out in the garage or out in a shed or in a basement, and it's got hot or it's got cold or something else, plastic, like anything else, will just get decayed and worse over time. Just like if you had an old tire you left out somewhere, eventually it's going to be more likely to fail. And since soda pop bottles generally are not very expensive, I'd recommend using new ones, and don't try to save ones for months or years in your garage and then pull them out and use them, because they're not going to be as good as a newer one. Also, the bottles get weaker after each launch. So they recommend that you only use bottles no more than 20 launches. All right, let's move. All right, the difference between a bottle and a rocket. On the left, you'll see a bottle. Okay, looks pretty much like you'd expect to see a bottle. What turns it into a rocket? Boom, when it's turned upside down. The reason I always bring this up, especially when I'm training cadets with this, is the mouth of the bottle is facing down when it becomes a rocket. So if you try to build a rocket and you put the fins on the bottom, you're going to have them upside down. So I always have to remind the cadets that when the rocket is on the launcher, the mouth of the bottle is facing down. So when they're building the fins and putting them on, they need to put the fins on the bottom of the rocket, which would also be the top of the bottle. All right, as far as rocket construction here, these are some rockets that were constructed at encampment back in 2019. And as you can see here for my egg drop mission, each of these flights came up with different ideas. The one for Delta Flight in the lower right there, they had a parachute attachment where it was going to dispatch from the rocket and then parachute to the ground. The Charlie one to the lower left, they just had a lot of cushioning in there, and the whole rocket was going to come down together. Alphas there had almost like a helicopter-like arrangement where it was going to spiral down and hopefully cushion the fall. Bravos was similar to Charlie's in that it was going to be a one-unit operation as far as getting the egg back to the ground. You'll notice too that there's actually 2 soda bottles with each of these. The soda bottle at the bottom, the one with the blue cap, is actually the rocket motor. That's the one that doesn't have any holes in it. It's a solid soda pop bottle. The green bottles were cut into, and those were the cargo areas. The one thing to remember is when you're making a soda pop bottle rocket, you cannot cut into the bottle that you're going to pressurize. You can't attach it to another bottle and make one big bottle because the duct tape holding it together will not hold. You can tape parts of another bottle to the first part as long as you don't puncture that motor part of your rocket. And just as an aside, these are baby pop bottles. When soda bottles are originally made at the plastics factory, they're made in these little test tube like things with thick plastic. When they're going to be turned into soda bottles, they're placed into a form, and then hot air is blown inside, and that plastic expands to the shape of the form and then is cooled. All right, prepping for launch on the rockets. First thing, obviously, you're going to have to do is pour water into the rocket. Now, you don't have to pour any water in if you don't want to. You can launch it just with air pressure. You can also fill the rocket completely to the top with water and launch it like that. It's up to you. You're going to put the rocket on the launcher, pressurize it, and then you're ready to go. The question comes up, is there a perfect amount of water to use in a pop bottle rocket? Well, yes, of course there is. I've been doing this for a long time now, and I've figured out the perfect amount of water, and I'm going to tell you that it's a secret. But really, well, maybe not. 333 milliliters. For a completely clear and empty pop bottle rocket with no fins, just a 2-liter bottle, 333 milliliters of water will get you to the highest height you can. Don't ask me why. I just figured it out. All right, some safety stuff here. Bursting pressure. It's the pressure at which the rocket will burst. It's 150 to 180 psi for a 2-liter rocket. Whenever we're doing rocket operations, the highest we ever pressurize a rocket to is 100 psi. And you'll see when this rocket, or this bottle rather, is expanded, it gets up to 150 psi before it blows. And of course, you notice that just before it exploded, it expanded quite a bit. So if you're ever doing pop bottle rocket operations and you're pressuring up a bottle and you see it start to expand in that weird shape, stop immediately because something bad is going to happen. Some optional gear for your rocket launches: altitude trackers, a measuring tape, which you'd use in conjunction with the trackers. Should be at least 50 feet long, and I'll get into that in a little bit why. And a stopwatch. Most days, everyone has a cell phone of some type that has a stopwatch feature on it. But if you want to use just a separate stopwatch, either way will work. And the altitude trackers, there are some that are commercially produced. This one here is from Estes, and there's some homemade ones. There's multiple plans that are available. NASA has free plans. It makes a good, easy to construct altitude tracker. As far as the Estes commercial one, it looks like a little pistol. There's a front sight, a rear sight, a trigger, and a little pendulum. You hold it just like you'd hold a pistol and look through the sights and follow the rocket as it ascends. While you're doing that, you're going to hold the trigger down. When you hold the trigger down, that pendulum is released and it will swing back and forth. As you raise the tracker up, the pendulum will swing backwards. When the rocket gets to its maximum height, its apogee, simply release the trigger and it'll lock the pendulum in place. And you can see here the cadet on the right is demonstrating to the one on the left how to use the tracker. And she's holding it just like she should, at arm's length, just looking through it. And in the pictures on the right, you see what it looks like when you're looking through the sights. Very simple to use. Now, once that trigger is released, the pendulum will stop. You can take the tracker down and look at it. There's two pieces of information you're going to get. The first one is going to be the angle of the elevation that you were looking at. And you can see there it looks like this angle was approximately 32 degrees. The second thing is a small window at the bottom. And you're usually going to see three numbers in there, one of which is going to be clearer than the other two. In this case, it's 95. That's going to tell you the actual height of the rocket if you have your trackers at the space it says from the launcher. These rocket trackers were made for normal commercial model rockets, which tend to go higher. That's why all the dimensions on this, it says altitude meters and launch pad 150 meters away. For Pop Bottle Rocketry, we just use feet instead of meters. So all the dimensions are feet instead of meters. It works out. So in this case, we would have our trackers 150 feet from the launch pad. The altitude would be in feet and not meters. And then here's the NASA website. And this is a very long website, but if you got an internet search site and just typed in NASA Pop Bottle Rocketry, it'll bring you to this. And there's one of the NASA scientists demonstrating their homemade tracker. Easy to make, easy to use. Okay, now your launch site. Launch site should be a minimum of 90 feet across. Just for reference, 90 feet is the size of a baseball infield in the major leagues. So just think about how big that is, and that's about how big your launch site should be, with the launch pad being basically where the pitcher's mound would be. One thing you got to make sure of too is obviously you're going to be away from buildings and other things, but also make sure you're not under near power lines, because when these rockets go off loaded with the water that they are, there's a lot of force behind them. And sometimes if there's a lot of water in them, they'll come down with some water still in them. So you want to make sure you don't have a wet soda bottle hitting a power line either from below or from above. All right, another important thing to remember is regardless of the kind of launcher you have to make sure that that rocket is secured to the launcher. This is one thing that can cause injury sometime if someone's not paying attention. They think the rocket is secured and they lean over the launcher and they go to pressurize it. So you have to ensure it's secured to the launch before pressurizing it. If it's not, you'll find out very quickly and possibly painfully. All right. Generally, at about 20 psi, if that rocket's not secured to there, that's enough pressure to lift it off the launcher. So if someone's pressurizing the rocket and they're leaning over it, it's going to come up and either give them a black eye, broken nose, or it might lose some teeth. And this is where Senior Member Stash comes back in. He's going to give us our safety demonstration on what happens if you get hit in the face with a rocket. So I'll show you a couple of videos here. The first one on the left is being slow motion, and the one on the right, full speed, so you can see how fun it is to get hit in the head with a rocket.
Oh no!
see Senior Member Staff lost his lens out of his safety glasses. And got a resounding thud in the head. All right, there's the remains of Senior Member Stash. The purple playground ball there actually got punctured when we were doing these tests. So it's got a lot of force when it comes up there and hits you, and you'd rather not be at the receiving end of a pop bottle to the face. All right, we're going to cover very quickly some of the things that we talked to when we do the cadet presentation, but just wanted to make sure you're familiar with them. That's the apogee, PSI, the angle tangent method, and the time altitude formula. Now, the apogee is the highest point the rocket achieves in the flight. So when the rockets launch, we want to find out how high it goes, the highest point. And when you're tracking that, all you're doing is tracking it till it gets to its highest point, releasing the trigger, and you're going to look at your pendulum, see where you're at. PSI, pounds per square inch. It's a measure of air pressure. And at sea level, air pressure is about 14.7 psi. So when we're launching a rocket and we have it at 50 psi, actually the psi is going to be closer to 65 psi because the psi on the gauge is only the difference between what the current pressure is and the additional pressure you're putting in there. All right, and this is what we use the trackers for, the angle tangent method. It's the baseline distance, which is the distance from the tracker, my little soldier there, to the launch pad. And as I said before, we usually use 150 feet away from it. The angle tangent is the angle that you're going to see on your pendulum. Multiply those together and you're going to get the altitude. Now on the NASA website, it has their basic altitude tracker. It also has a chart that converts all that. So you don't have to try to figure out all the advanced math stuff about multiply and do that. You can just set your distance and you can use their chart to figure out from the angle what your altitude is. Okay, the time altitude formula. Cadets love this because it's a very simple formula you can fill out in your head. Take your flight time, obviously use the timer for that. Multiply that by the ratio of climb versus fall of the rocket. That's a constant. Square that result. Multiply that by the acceleration of gravity. Okay, still tracking, right? Divide the product by 2, and you get the height of the rocket. So, you know, that's pretty easy. I can do that in my head, right? No, I just make a chart for you. So this is actually a fairly accurate formula because that formula was designed for model rockets. So the chart here, you just figure out your time in seconds, round it down to the nearest tenth of a second, and that'll give you the approximate expected height in feet for the rocket. And we found this to be fairly accurate when we've tested it several times. All right. As far as getting ready to launch the rockets, there's certain pop out rocket positions. These are not mandated in any manuals or regulations. These are just things that over the years I've worked out, and they seem to work very well when we do launches. You're going to have a launch officer, a pressurization officer, a flight timer, and an altitude tracker. And we like to get 2 if we can. Mainly in case there's wind, 2 trackers can be put at opposite sides, and they can monitor the height of the rocket better. And if they have different readings, they can be averaged off to give a more accurate count of the altitude. Okay, first of all, the launch officer secures the rocket to the launcher, gives the countdown, and releases the rocket by pulling the release cord. Okay, since he's the one that secures the rocket, he's also going to be the one that's going to pull that cord off. So he's always looking around. He's the one that makes the final call whether it gets launched or not. Pressurization officer uses an air compressor or a tire pump to pressurize the rocket once it's secured to the launcher. Now you'll see there how close his head is to the rocket. His head's not over the rocket, but it is close to it. Because of that, he's always going to be wearing glasses in case that rocket were bad, had some bad plastic and it were explodable. We don't want to get any of that stuff in his eyes. The flight timer, got a stopwatch there. He's going to start the stopwatch when the rocket is launched and stop it when the rocket hits the ground. Altitude trackers. They're going to follow the flight of the rocket with the altitude tracker according to the apogee of the rocket's flight. And as I said, it's just like holding a pistol. Okay, pull the trigger when the rocket's going up, release the trigger when it gets to its apogee, and then checking the pendulum to see what the angle is and the height. Some basic safety rules we always go by. When the rocket's on the launcher, everyone pays attention to the launch officer, because remember, he's the one that has the cord that's going to release the rocket. No one has any part of their body over the rocket when it's on the launcher. We always assume that when the rocket's on the launcher, it's pressurized. And as you can see here, she's pumping up the rocket. Her head's about 4 feet away from there, but it's not over it. She does have glasses on, either safety glasses, or if you have prescription glasses, those will be fine too. Because if the rocket were to explode, plastic's not going to go flying everywhere like shrapnel. It'll just stay ripped in that one area. You might get some water splash in your face and maybe a random piece of plastic, but nothing too terribly bad. The launch officer, of course, will ensure everyone's ready before launching. So as far as procedures, the launch officer places the rocket on the launcher and secures it. Pressurization officer pressurizes the rocket. The launch officer then ensures everyone's ready, then counts down, pulls the release cord, launching the rocket. Typically, we will do a point and shout. So the launch officer will point at the trackers and ask them if trackers are ready. They will respond with a thumbs up and say they're ready. He will point to the timer and ask the timer if the timer is ready. The timer will give a thumbs up and respond that the timer is ready. And he'll give a short 3, 2, 1 countdown. And the flight timer will start the stopwatch. The altitude trackers will track the rocket to its apogee. And then the flight timer stops the stopwatch when the rocket hits the ground. Now we've got some launches here. The first one at full speed. You'll see what it looks like. And the second one, because it looks very cool, in slow motion. And once again, from a little bit further out, slow motion. And you can see how quickly it accelerates when it's coming off the launch pad. All right. Well, apparently Senior Member Stash back from the hospital, and he's decided he no longer wants to be the safety officer. However, he did let us know what WH stands for. Apparently, he's a Wanhu fanatic, and he wants to recreate Wanhu's famous flight. However, to be safer, he doesn't want to use a rocket chair. He decided he's going to use a pop bottle rocket to take a little ride. So what we should do to Senior Member Stash and see how his pop bottle rocket goes.
Wanhu!
All right, Senior Member Stash, to be seen later. All right. Thanks very much for sitting through this and listening to me. If you want some of the information as far as the rockets, perhaps activities I've done before with them, some of the sheets we use to record rocket launches, there's going to be a link set up for the conference. And if you're viewing this later on or outside the conference, my email address is on the bottom here. Just drop me a quick note and I can send you a link so you can have all that stuff to use. Also, if you have any questions of me, feel free to contact me at any time and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks very much and enjoy the rest of the conference.
Okay, here we are. Thanks for watching that. I don't see any questions. If you got any rolling in, let me know. Or if you think of some later, feel free to email me. As I said, we do this every year at encampment, and every year I try to come up with something different to make it a little bit more interesting. It's a very good program to use if you want to have something that doesn't involve fire or flame, and it's a good long-term training program that's very cheap. Do we have any questions about anything at all? So far, we're coming up dry. I gotta, all right. All right. Well, if there's no further questions, I think we'll be signing off for now. And then I would also recommend Lieutenant Nush has a general model rocketry presentation. He's given at 4 p.m. today, which covers basically normal model rocketry with fire and flame, and makes it more exciting. Pop bottle rocketry is a great introduction to that, and it's a continuation of that, working towards your model rocketry badge. So I would encourage you to jump in on that presentation if you're interested in doing some rocketry stuff with your cadets. Thank you, and I will see you later.